vacant session. You may be seated.
Wearing a jacket. Insurers have complained about it being cold. Is there any way to?
I can get it up. That's all you had to tell me.
We agree on one thing. That was it.
I'd rather have the jurors suffer so that you can be comfortable.
Yes.
Is that what
No,
I'm hearing?
no, just ask for you to give them coats and blankets.
All right, Mr. Evans, is your next witness one that we need to have the jury out with as well?
Yes, Your
Let's
Honor.
go ahead and bring her in then.
That's Scotty
Her or
Wiggins.
him.
Stand right here, facing back, raise your right hand, be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
The signature right there. Slide this microphone right up to you so you can talk to it.
Good morning, Mr. Wiggins.
Hello?
Would you please state your full name for the benefit of the court reporter and spell your last name?
Scott James Wiggins, Wiggins.
And Mr. Wiggins, where do you live?
Dayton, Tennessee.
And, all right. Mr. Wiggins, you know that you're here today because we're in a sentencing hearing where this jury is determining whether or not to sentence your brother to the death penalty, correct?
Yes.
If your brother were to be executed, how would that affect you?
It's like, I've known him most of my life, and it's like taking half of my life away.
And Mr. Wiggins, do you have a son?
Yes.
And what's his name?
Samuel,
And how old is Samuel?
12.
Uncle Stephen?
Yes.
And were they close?
Yes.
All right. How would it affect Sammy or Samuel if Stephen were to be executed?
Well, Sammy's different. He thinks that Stephen is a kid. That's his friend that he plays with, and you know. I don't know how much Sam knows about any of this, but I don't know.
Okay.
It's hard to say.
And you said Samuel's different. Is he autistic?
Yes.
And would he be considered severely autistic?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, those are my questions as part of the offer of proof.
All right, Mr. Wiggins, let me talk with you for a moment. I have made certain rulings in this case regarding the admissibility of evidence, and those rulings include the fact that no one, neither the state nor the defense witnesses, will be allowed to give their opinion about the punishment that the jury should impose or should not impose, nor will they be entitled to give the type of testimony that you've given this morning regarding the effect that Mr. Wiggins, that your brother's execution or the death penalty might have on you and your family. Under those circumstances, I just need to make sure that you understand it is a court order, that you answer only the questions that your lawyer poses to you, and he's been ordered about what he can ask you. But you cannot volunteer that other information. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. And I'm satisfied he understands his role. We are ready then for the jury to return. And he has been sworn, correct, on the record?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for your cooperation. As I explained to you earlier, we are taking up certain procedural matters while you are outside of the courtroom, and in your absence, this witness has been brought in and has been sworn in, so his testimony will likewise be under oath.
Mr. Wiggins, could you please state your name for the jury?
Scott James Wiggins.
And how are you related to Stephen Wiggins?
That's my brother.
And do you currently work outside the home?
I'm not employed outside the home.
And do you have a son?
Yes.
And what's his name?
Samuel.
Do y'all call him Sammy?
Sammy.
And is Sammy autistic?
Yes.
And is it such that he needs full-time care?
Yes, he has to have full-time care.
And is that your full-time job?
Yes.
All right. And are you married?
No.
I want to talk to you for a few minutes, Scotty. Kind of going back in time to your childhood, if you don't mind, okay?
Okay.
Do you remember what your grandmother's name was on your father's side?
Yes, it was Mabel.
And do you have any memories of being at Miss Mabel's house?
Yes.
And what do you remember about her house?
It's very small, 2-bedroom. It was often crowded.
Is there a bunch of people there that live there?
People lived there on and off sometimes when they needed to. Everyone visited there often.
And did you live there with your mom and dad when you were little?
Yes.
At some point, did y'all move into another house between Harriman and Oliver Springs?
Yes.
Once you got to that house, let me just ask you this. Do you have any good memories from your childhood at that home?
No.
Why?
The only memories that stand out are not good memories, and the rest are very old and faded memories.
Scotty, was your father physically abusive to you?
Yes.
Did this happen on a daily basis?
Yes.
What's one of the, while you were in this house even, is there a particular event that you remember pretty vividly about him abusing you?
Yes.
And what is that memory?
one that's most clear to me was being awakened. I was asleep when he decided to start hitting me with a stick, pretty large stick. And it's one of those memories I can't forget.
Do you have nightmares about it
Yeah,
to this day?
yeah.
Was there another incident that you recall when you were about 4 or 5 regarding a TV antenna?
Yes.
What happened?
I was told to go outside and adjust the TV antenna.
By your dad?
Yes. And he was very angry that I couldn't tie my shoes. I didn't know how. So he beat me with a belt. And saying he would continue until I learned how to tie my shoes.
Was he willing to teach you how to tie your shoes?
No, he was willing to scream at me to learn how to do it.
How did you find out? I mean, how'd you learn?
I asked my cousins.
I know I've only asked you about a couple of incidents this far, but were these types of beatings a way of life in that household during those years?
Yes.
When you were around 2nd grade, did y'all then move into a house on Margrave in Harriman?
Yes.
Can you describe that house for the jury?
It was a 2-bedroom, 1 living room, and 1 bathroom. It wasn't large. It was built on a hill, on the side of a hill, I guess. It's very close to the road.
Were you allowed to play outside?
Only when we were told to.
And what about the inside of the home? Were the windows open and where you could get light in the house and see outside, or were they covered?
All the windows are covered.
And what about locks on the front door?
We had a very heavy, solid wooden door, deadbolts, chains, latches.
And why? Why so many locks?
I don't know, but I know the top ones we couldn't reach.
So if they were locked, you couldn't get out, could you?
No.
When you talk about the beatings from your father, would you know when they were coming?
No.
Have any warning whatsoever?
No.
Did you ever see your dad beat your mother?
Yes.
Was that a regular occurrence?
Yes.
Did you ever see your father beat Stephen?
Yes.
And was that a regular occurrence?
Yes.
At night, when you were in bed, did you and your brother share a room at times?
Yes.
Did any of those beatings take place then, when you guys would be in the bed at night before you went to sleep?
I can only remember once, but that's just because that's all I can remember.
And can you describe how that happened?
Like most others happened. He would just appear in the room, just storm in, hit us with anything he had, any object he could find.
Is that you and Stephen both?
Yeah.
Was there never an incident with a rotary telephone?
Yeah.
And what happened with that telephone?
Like most other things, it was an object for him to use to hit us.
Did he hit you with that telephone?
Yes.
Just once or multiple times?
Twice.
And this was again in the home where Stephen would have been present and witnessed this, correct?
Yeah. Although I don't know that day, I think Stephen was in the living room and I was in the bedroom. I think.
Would your dad hit Stephen daily?
Yes.
Where on his body did he prefer to hit him?
If he was incredibly angry at the time, he could hit Stephen anywhere, but every day, all day, he would hit Stephen in the head.
And would he just pop him in the head, or would he hit him with enough with some force?
It varied. Sometimes it was just a pop, and sometimes it was a full force.
Would it knock Stephen off his feet at times?
Sometimes.
Did he ever grab you two by the hair?
Yes.
And was that something that happened regularly as well?
Yeah.
And would he grab you by the hair as part of a beating you were taking?
Yes.
Did he ever grab you by the hair and run your head into the wall?
Yes.
And that's you and Stephen both?
Yes. Stephen being smaller, he could almost throw Stephen by the hair.
And he did throw him, didn't he? Would it damage the walls?
Sometimes.
Was there ever a time where you witnessed Scott Wiggins have a knife to your mother's throat?
Yes.
And describe that incident for the jury. Do you remember what happened? What you saw?
Yes. I saw him threatening my mother. I was asleep. I woke up, I could hear them fighting, arguing. And I went to the door of the bedroom and I saw him threatening my mom. With a knife. And making some really nasty statements to her about wanting to hurt her or force her to choose being hurt or hurting us.
Did your dad ever have any crazy ideas about the world coming to an end?
He had a lot of crazy ideas.
Was that pretty common with him?
Yeah.
Did you ever get beaten with him using that crazy idea as an excuse?
Yeah. Sometimes he would say it was to prevent what was going to happen in the future. Like, I don't know. It didn't make sense.
And those were meetings that you and Stephen took together?
Sometimes, yeah.
Did you ever know your father to work?
Not really. He had sometimes people that he would go with, I guess. I don't know what all they did. I think they tried painting or something. You know, but that was just short-lived.
You love your brother Stephen, don't you?
Yes.
And you talked about Sammy earlier. Did Sammy have a relationship with Stephen?
Yeah.
Now, with Sammy's autism, does he have a quirk about not letting people cut his hair?
Oh yes. He's terrified of haircuts, trimmers or scissors.
Did he trust his Uncle Stephen to cut his hair?
Yeah.
Is that the only person he trusted to cut his hair, just about?
Yeah.
Your Honor, those are my questions. Thank you so much, Scott.
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wiggins. You may step down. Have a seat in the courtroom if you'd like. Mr. Evans, you have another witness?
I do, Your Honor, but it's been required.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, for procedural reasons, I'm going to ask you to step outside, please. And who is your next witness?
Your Honor, my next witness would be Juanita Wiggins.
All right, bring in Ms. Wiggins.
Stand right here, face the clerk, raise your right hand, be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, ma'am.
Have a seat in that chair, speak directly into the microphone.
Your Honor, I've got two matters for the jury out, for the court to consider. One is the standard questions that I've been asking. The other, I'm going to pass up to the court. Crouch already has a copy of this. This is a letter that I will proceed to introduce through Ms. Wiggins. Written by Spencer Wiggins, Stephen Wiggins' son.
All right. You want to address the letter first, or do you want to address the, I mean, I understand you're offering this letter from the defendant's son. In the letter, for the record, the son expresses his desire that the jury not give him the death penalty, and goes on to talk about some things that he remembers about his father, but also goes on to talk about thinking about if he would never get to feel hugs from him, et cetera again. So let me hear from the state.
Judge, we're opposed to the letter. In fact, we also have if the letter is allowed, we have a video statement of Sergeant Baker's daughter, Meredith, that we would contend that for court purposes, no place for one of them.
Mr. Evans, I'm going to allow the letter to be marked as an exhibit for purposes of the appellate record, and I do not believe that it would be appropriate for evidence even at a mitigation at a sentencing hearing, and therefore I'm going to deny the introduction of it before the jury.
So, Your Honor, what I would ask then is a second request, based on Your Honor's ruling related to, prior ruling regarding the preferences related to sentencing. I've prepared a highlighted version to represent those that could be redacted out of the letter and be presented. I would ask the court to consider that. I would also like to direct the court's attention to two cases. One's State versus Cawthorn.
State versus Cawthorn.
Cawthorn. In that case, the trial court excluded a letter written to the defendant from his 8-year-old son expressing love and support. In light of the principles expressed in section 3913-204C, we conclude that the trial court erred in excluding the letter. And that's it's directly out of State versus Austin, which is 87 Southwest 3rd, 447 at 461 Tennessee Supreme Court, 2002. And in brief response, Your Honor, I will say this. Again, I know that the state thinks that it's a proper rebuttal, even if this letter comes in. It is not. to put on further victim impact testimony that is very narrowly tailored and defined based on pain and the court's ruling in Nesbitt adopting pain. This is mitigation. It's part of the statute. It's part of what the jury gets to consider. And I understand the court's ruling, so I would ask at this time that the letter in a redacted form, that letter be allowed to be presented to the jury.
Well, first of all, that letter that you're referring to in the Cawthorn case and the citation you gave was a letter written from the child to his father. This is a letter not written from the child to his father. It is a letter written from the child, essentially, to whom it may involve. I mean, it's just to whom it may concern, because it's not addressed to him. It addresses his relationship with his father, but it does not specifically state that it's to his father. But obviously, I'm going to need to look at that case and to make a determination as to whether or not that would be admissible. But we can do that after we have concluded all of the testimony of this witness. I assume this is the witness that you intend to introduce that through, or do you
Yes.
just plan to make it an exhibit if I allow it?
I would intend to introduce it through this witness.
Well, let's go ahead and cover the other ground rules that we have with Mrs. Wiggins, and then before we allow her to be concluded from her testimony in front of the jury, it'll probably be close to lunch at that point. So we'll break for lunch, and I'll consider this over the lunch break as to whether or not that letter would be admitted.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Ms. Wiggins, would you mind removing your mask while you testify? Thank you. Would you please state your full name and spell your last for the benefit of the court reporter?
Juanita Wiggins, Wiggins.
And you're Stephen's mother?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that the purpose of this hearing is that this jury is determining whether or not to sentence your son to death?
Yes, sir.
If he were to be executed, how would that affect you?
Dramatically, sir. Only has Stephen and Spencer, Scotty and Sammy, and my sister and her son. So look, I only have a book now. I love my son, and I know he's done something wrong. But I don't want him to be put to death.
Okay. You mentioned Spencer, and is Spencer Stephen's son?
Yes.
Does he love his daddy?
Yes.
And what effect, based on what you know of Spencer, would this have on him if his daddy were to be executed?
He tells me it would break his little heart.
And the letter that has been talked about and presented to the court, did Spencer write that letter?
Yes. He's trying to do what he can to defend his father. I remember when my kids used to try to defend me.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Ms. Wiggins, let me make sure that you understand. You may have been sitting in the courtroom when I've gone over this with other individuals, but I want to make sure you understand. I've put down certain orders and rules about what is admissible and what's not. So while I certainly understand your feelings and those of your grandson regarding this issue, I want you to understand that my obligation is to make those rules and to enforce them. So when you testify in front of the jury, just answer the questions that your lawyer or that Mr. Evans is putting to you, and don't volunteer this information that you've just gone into. I've let it be admitted for the record, but you will need to only answer those questions and not volunteer the effect that you believe this would have on yourself or on your grandson. Do you understand that?
What did I say wrong right there?
No, what you said was fine.
Oh, okay,
I'm not
okay. Yes, I
saying-
understand then.
Right.
Okay.
But you just can't say those things in front of the jury. I'm letting that be a part of the
Yes, sir.
record.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not going to allow it in front of the jury. So you will be able to testify and answer the questions that Mr. Evans
sir.
asked you, but don't volunteer that information.
Yes, sir.
All right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I believe she understands my orders. So we'll bring the jury in. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. And again, in your absence, I took care of a procedural matter. So we have this lady here who has already been sworn to testify, so her testimony will be under oath.
Ms. Wiggins, would you please state your full name for the benefit of the jury?
Juanita Wiggins.
And what's your relationship with Stephen Wiggins?
He is my youngest son.
And where do you live, Ms. Wiggins?
I live in Dayton, Tennessee.
And how long have you lived in Dayton?
2 to 3 years.
And do you work?
Yes, sir.
Where do you work?
I work at Walmart.
Okay. Now, Ms. Wiggins, I want to kind of go back in time with you and talk about some things, okay? And where are you originally from?
Harriman, Tennessee.
Okay. Sister was in here earlier, Julie.
Yes.
And is she your younger sister?
Yes, she's my younger sister.
And y'all were raised in the same house?
Yes, sir.
And your folks, what were their names, your parents?
Wanda and Robert Hicks.
And do you have good memories of your childhood with them?
Oh, yes. We had a good childhood. We weren't rich or anything like that, but my mom and dad were really good people. They took very good care of us, took care of each other. We grew up in a very stable family.
Did you get along good with your sister growing up?
Pretty good. There was a big age difference, and also she was born crippled, which made her not walk until she was like 5. So that sort of even set it back a little bit, even then.
Okay. And you went to school, grade school,
Yes,
right?
sir.
At some time, then you went to high school.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were in high school, did you meet a fellow named Scott Wiggins?
Yes, sir.
And did y'all start dating?
Yes, sir.
And how was Scott Wiggins to you when y'all were dating?
Normal. Fine. Everything was fine. We used to go to the movies. We had fun.
And did you eventually become pregnant with your oldest son, Scotty?
Yes.
And at the time that happened, where were you living?
I was living at home. I was only 17 at the time. And with my mom and dad and my sister in Harriman.
And did you tell your parents you were pregnant?
Did I tell them? No.
Did you move out of the house?
Yes.
All right. And where did you move?
I moved in with Scott at his mother's, Mabel Wiggins, in Olive Springs, Tennessee.
And at that time, did you drop out of school?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, since then, did you ever go back? Have you ever gotten your GED or diploma?
Yes, sir. I went back, got my GED, and tried to go to college, but in the environment, I couldn't finish. It was too much. I was trying to work. I was trying to go to school. I was trying to take care of my children. I just couldn't do it all after about the first year.
Okay. So, when you were living at Mabel Wiggins' house with Scott, who else lived there? Back when you moved into Mabel Wiggins' house.
Who lived there
Yeah.
when I moved in?
Yeah, when you moved in.
Scott, his mom, I think maybe Anna and Karen and their brother Charles lived there then.
Okay. After you moved in at Mabel's house with Scott, did Scott's demeanor change?
Instantly.
And what did he start doing that was different?
Physically, mentally, verbally abusing. I've had him knock me totally unconscious when I was pregnant with Scotty and left me laying outside.
And is that why you were still at Miss Mabel's house?
Yes.
From that point on, did his abuse of you before Scotty was born continue like that?
Yes.
And would he grab you by the hair?
Yes.
And drag you around?
Yes.
What for? I mean, not that there was ever an excuse, but would there be an excuse?
No, he would stay awake for days and days and nights. And then he would go to sleep. And he would sleep with his eyes open. And then when he would wake up, he would do things like Jim and Bob came by, and why were they here? They weren't here. Yeah, they were. And you all went back into the kitchen. What were you doing? There had been nobody there. Nothing had occurred. He couldn't define, I guess, a dream from reality. And he would make up his own reality to things, not just what we all see as a reality. I don't know if he was psychotic. I don't know what was wrong with him. He wasn't right.
Would he sometimes beat you because of things that he thought happened that didn't really happen?
Yes, all the time. All the time. Jennifer talking about the sandwich. I've made an upside down bologna sandwich so many times in my life that I don't know how I make an upside down bologna sandwich so many times.
Were there, while you were in Miss Mabel's house, was there ever any issue with sexual abuse of you by Scott?
In Mabel's house? No.
Okay. Where did y'all live after Mabel's house?
We lived in a town in Harriman, Tennessee, in an apartment. That's when we met Jennifer and Daryl.
Okay.
Right.
And during that period of time, had Stephen been born yet?
No.
And how old was Scotty around the time you moved into that apartment?
He was small. I moved out because Scott had shot his brother in the middle of the night. Their dad had shot his brother in the middle of the night. And
What was his brother's name? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but the one he shot.
Troy Wiggins.
Okay.
I don't know what happened. I was in bed asleep, so was Scotty in our room. He was in one bed and I was in the other. I heard a gunshot go off. I jumped up. Troy struck me a few times and ran out of the room. Or someone struck me a few times. It was dark. I think it was Troy. Angela, their stepsister, was at the house. She ran through, and I remember seeing when she grabbed Scotty, he was little, maybe 2, and he was covered in Troy's blood where the blood had splattered from the gunshot. And I thought he had been shot. I thought my baby had been shot.
So did y'all move out of Mabel's house after that?
Yes, I couldn't take it anymore there. Troy came straight back from the hospital to there. And I was the only person working. His girlfriend and her child was coming, and all these people lived there, and I thought it was too stressful to be
And
there.
where were you working?
I worked at Kaiser Roth in Harriman. It was a factory.
And you were the only person in Mabel's house that had a job at that time?
Yes, sir.
Now, did you ever know, we're going to jump forward just a little for a minute, but did you ever know Scott Wiggins to work?
Not really. If he did have a job, half the time he'd make Scotty and Stephen go do the most of it. If he did have something to do.
So let's go back. You're when you move into the apartment that you were talking about, where you came into contact with, I believe, the Bryants. Mm-hmm. And during that period of time in that apartment, did the beatings from Scott continue for you?
Yes, they got worse. That's what I didn't realize. I didn't realize that once he got me totally secluded, that it was going to get worse. It got worse.
And how old would Scotty have been at that time?
3, maybe 4. He didn't go to school yet.
And with Scotty at that age, had Scott started abusing him?
Yes.
And did you continue to work for, I think, Kaiser, I think you said it was?
Kaiser Roth.
While you were out living in that apartment?
Yes.
And about how long were y'all in that apartment?
Pretty sure a couple of years.
Where were you living when Stephen was born?
In Oliver Springs.
Now, there's been some testimony about you using marijuana at times
Yes, sir.
over the years. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did Scott continue to be physically abusive to you up through the time that you were pregnant with Stephen?
Yes, sir.
Did he physically abuse you while you were pregnant with Stephen?
Yes, sir.
And how so?
Really the same. Actually, we went back to that house recently to take a picture of it, and I remembered the steps. I remembered him dragging me by my hair all the way out of the house, across the porch, and down the steps, pregnant with Stephen.
Did he ever kick you when you were pregnant with Stephen?
Kick me?
Kick you?
Yes.
Did he hit you?
Yes.
Did he ever kick you in the stomach?
Yes.
Was that on one occasion or multiple occasions?
In the stomach?
Yes.
I want to say twice that I know, that I remember. You try to block these things out once you escape. Once you escape, you try not to think about it anymore. You want to go on and you want to live.
Once Stephen was born, how was Scott to live with? Was he still the same person, or did he change?
No, he didn't change. He didn't. As Steve grew up, I think he didn't like the fact that Steve was a silly little boy. He liked to be funny. And Scott didn't like funny. He didn't like holidays. He would always make sure that he ruined any Christmas or anything for us, that somehow he would just make sure it wasn't going to be a good day.
As the boys got older, did Scott's physical abuse of them increase?
Yes.
And was it I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if his mental problems got worse or if he just began to enjoy it more. It just seemed to get worse and worse and worse, to the point that anything was a weapon. There was weapons, knives. He's held guns to our head. The verbal abuse was, it was so outrageous that he would rant sometimes for hours with just cuss words and name calling and just racial slurs, anything against us, just, and it wouldn't even make sense. It would just be word, 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 word. And all the time. It just got worse, actually.
At one point, did he ever hit Stephen in the head with a 2x4?
On one of his jobs, he had taken Scotty and Stephen with him. They were painting, doing remodel, I think, is what it was called, in a house. And he had taken Scotty and Stephen to help him. And Scotty was big enough that he could use, he was probably 12 or 13 or so, but he could use like a heat gun, and he was taking wallpaper down. And apparently, Stephen went outside to help his dad unload some wood, by my understanding. There was another person working there named Carl Cooney, and I think he was like the head contractor person or something. And Steve came home, and he had a place on his head right at his hairline. And I asked him what happened, and he told me that his dad hit him in the head with a 2x4. So I cleaned his head up.
Was it bleeding?
It had been bleeding because the hair was all dried in blood. And Steve, I guess, took a shower and went to bed. And I confronted Scott about it. Well, when things like this happen with him, like I said, he lives in a different reality, okay? It wasn't his fault that he hit Steve in the head with the 2x4. Stephen wasn't moving fast enough at work. And when he threw the 2x4 to him, he should have been ready to catch it. Steve was only like 8, 9 years old. He wasn't a grown man on a work crew. It was always somehow your fault that these things happen. Steve got his eye blacked once when Scott had Scotty by the arm, slinging a belt, beating him, and Steve tried to run past in the little bedroom, and his elbow caught Stephen in the eye and blacked Steve's eye.
And you were in the courtroom when Mr. Caudell testified. Was that the picture that was shown?
Yes.
And then
That's how Steve got the black eye. But it was Steve's fault that he got the black eye. By the way Scott looked at it, it was Steve's fault. He should stay over there and not moved.
So, Miss Wiggins, what was the house like inside? Were the windows open?
No, we were not allowed to open the windows or the curtains. He kept everything deadbolted.
And were the deadbolts set up where the kids couldn't reach them so that they couldn't get out if they wanted to?
They couldn't. And I mentioned that over and over, that if there was a fire or something, they couldn't get out the door.
Now,
And these deadbolts weren't there when we moved in. There was only a handle with a lock. Scott on the door.
did the beatings for you, for Scott, and for Stephen happen on a daily basis?
Yes.
And in the evenings, well, let me ask you this. Was there ever any warning? Did you ever know when it was coming?
No, you might be asleep in bed and get a pillow over your face, or hit or drug out of the bed by your leg or arm. But there was no warning. There was no warning of anything.
And in the evenings, when the boys were in bed, did Scott have a preferred method for trying to get them to sleep?
He seemed to think that you could beat them to sleep.
Beat them to sleep?
Yes, sir.
And how would he do that?
With a belt.
Miss Wiggins, was Scott Wiggins ever sexually abusive to you?
Yes.
And did that happen several times throughout your relationship with him?
After the police told him he couldn't come back to the house, he came back. He sexually assaulted me.
I want to move forward to a particular night, and you've been in the courtroom, so I know you've heard it referenced, but was there a particular night where Scott shot at you and Stephen?
Yes.
Can you describe that event for the jury?
I don't know what happened. It was the same rampaging. And he said he was going to go get the gun and he was going to make me. And this had been said more than once. He's held a gun to my head, my kid's head, more than once. I don't know what happened. For some reason, I said no. And I picked up a pair of pliers that were laying on the coffee table. Not pliers, they're multi-tool. I picked one of those up and I slung it as hard as I could. And I knocked him up the side of the head with it, and he slid down the face of the door. And me and Stephen ran out the back door. I didn't have on shoes. Stephen was dressed. He was still dressed from, I think, maybe picking him up from football or something. I don't remember why, but he was still dressed. And we ran through the woods. And Scott had got the gun then, and he had a spotlight on the side of the truck. And as we would run through the woods, he would shine the spotlight, and when he would catch us, he would shoot. And I had on a white t-shirt, so I guess he could see me. And Steve kept screaming at him to quit shooting at me.
Did the police end up showing up?
Yes, we made it through the woods to the neighbors, and we hid behind their car. And when Steve seen Scott drive by and get out of sight, he ran over and beat on the door. It was in the night, in the middle of the night that this was going on. And the people came to the door and said they would call 911.
After that, did you return to that house with
Yes.
Steve? What caused you to leave that house?
Several things. I tried not to be the person that separated my children from their father. I didn't want to be that. By then, Stephen was of an age, he would still try to have some form of a relationship. I guess they loved him because he was their father. And Steve went fishing with his dad one night, and that's when Miss Gwen was explaining that Scott had stopped over the hill and turned the lights out and told Stephen that a truck was going to come over that hill and kill him. And Stephen came home, and I knew something was wrong because I told Scott he could not come back in there. Do not come back in my home. And the police had said he couldn't come back in there. And he dropped Steve off. Steve came in, told me what was going on. I gave him time to get back to his mother's. I called him. He just cussed me, never denied it, never denied he did it. And then, not long after that, just a few nights, I think, Stephen said the cat woke him up. And he opened the back door to let the cat out, and he smelled gasoline. And I opened the front door, I could smell gasoline. I knew that the police or nobody was going to be able to protect us from him. Me and Stephen, I had a little Toyota. Me and Stephen threw whatever we could throw in it. And we left. We went to Newport. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell where I worked. I didn't tell my friends.
Why not?
I was afraid. I knew if I went anywhere that he knew I was, he would find me. And then I was just going to get someone else killed too. I couldn't risk that. We just had to disappear. And we disappeared.
So throughout all this time, were you working full time?
Yes, sir.
And when you worked and came home with a check, were you allowed to keep your money?
No,
Who took it?
Scott took it.
And were y'all, during this time, were y'all a 2-car family or a 1-car family?
One.
And did you need that car to get to work?
Yes.
And did you have to take Scott anywhere on your way to and from work sometimes?
Sometimes.
And where would that be?
Usually at Mabel's.
Okay. Did you ever have to walk to work because Scott had the car?
Yes, many times.
And was he using the car to go to work?
No, sir.
Where would he be going?
Wherever he wanted, fishing or whatever. It didn't really matter. It was better if he wasn't there. We didn't care where he was. We didn't care what he was doing. He wasn't there hitting us. He wasn't there cussing us. It was the only peace that we had.
Now, after you fled that night with Stephen and moved, is that when Stephen went to live with his Aunt Julie for a while?
We went to Newport, yes.
Okay.
I knew I could find a job there. It's a tourist area. I knew I could get work quick. That's why I chose there.
Okay. And you love your son, Stephen, right?
Yes, very much.
And Scotty, too?
Yes.
Okay. And Stephen has a son, Spencer.
Yes.
And do you get to spend time with Spencer?
Often, as often as I can. When I came down to go to court, I came a day or two early, and we went to Walmart because he needed a Spider-Man game.
Okay. And you've been able to communicate through the jail service with Stephen while he's been in jail pending on this case, correct?
Yes.
And you've sent him pictures,
Oh, yes.
and he's able to communicate with Spencer through those.
Yes. Well, before the COVID, Spencer could go visit, but he couldn't because of the regulations at the jail after that.
And Spencer loves his daddy, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm going to stop at point.
All right, at this point then, let's go ahead and stop. We're going to have to take up something else, ladies and gentlemen, but we're going to go ahead and break for lunch at this point. So when we feel step out. Mrs. Wiggins, you can step down. You can sit down if you like. Have a seat in the audience. Let's take our noon recess until 1:15. And during that time, I'm going to look at the case law on the issue about this letter. And when we come back, I'll hear any additional argument. If you have any additional authority, one way or the other, and you'd like to submit, please give it to Ms. Fryer or Ms. Jones so that we can take a look at it. So, I've been handed a question, or at least a note from one of the jurors. Let me see what it says before we take our recess. All right, the question is, can you ask the young blonde lady in the back left corner of the courtroom if she is taking pictures of the jury? All right, we'll assure him of that. I know who you are and I know what you represent. So she is a member of the media from the local media, and she's been instructed as well not to do that. Anyone have any objection to me reassuring, just stepping in and reassuring the jurors of that fact? All right, I'll take care of that then. We'll stand in recess to 1:15.
All right. Court's in recess.